Hey guys, Rich with Rich Rebuilds here, and I am back with the electric Honda Beat, and today we're going to get the wheels turning on the electric K-car conversion. But first, I'm still in Trinidad, and I am loving life right now. Unfortunately, I had to use my mother's phone, which surprisingly doesn't record audio, to shoot this footage, seeing as I dropped my phone in water when I was swimming, because I do swim. Now it's in a bag of rice, but I'm eating mangoes, burning said mangoes in the fire, and helping my mother with the giant African snail population for some reason. By the way, in case you didn't know this, don't crush giant African snails. They're very invasive, and I learned this the hard way. When you crush them, they release their eggs, so there's literally more snails if you step on them. But then we saw a frog, and you leave the frog alone because they're just kind of cool and they mind their own business. Then when I was putting on my shoes this morning, I was greeted to a not-so-friendly crab hiding behind them. So tonight for dinner, I'm gonna eat them. Anyways, guys, there's tons going on in this trip. It's super expensive because I'd also like to build an off-grid house out here, and I wanted to thank my friends over at Drift for helping sponsor it. See, my friend John Ross is visiting out of town, and I let him use the Porsche, but when he brought it back, it needed a little freshening up, as they say. So I used my cool new product from Drift. They make air care products for your car and your home. Get it? Air care, not hair care. It's air care. Anyways, I use my summer spritz, and sometimes when I'm not feeling so fresh, I'll rub summer spritz all over my body so I smell extra good. All materials they use are sustainable, and their scents are made with natural, essential, and fragrance oils. Their car products range from $9 to $15, so they are super affordable, and you guys know I'm cheap. And whenever I borrow someone's car, I bring one with me just in case, and what's cool about car fresheners is that you can get them as a subscription. First, you receive a starter kit with the clip and the scent, then you can get monthly refills, as they recommend changing it every 30 days, and the best part is their scent of the month, which features a new limited edition scent. They're inspired by the season and the memories and emotions attached to it. It also helps Drift stick to its sustainability message and produce almost made-to-order products. Their subscription is very flexible. You can change your scent choice, your delivery frequency, or cancel your subscription anytime you like. Please use my coupon codes RICH for 55% off at Drift, and it's less than $5 for your first month. Thank you once again, Drift, for sponsoring this episode. So today we're going to continue to work on the electric Honda Beat by making some boxes for the contactors, and we're also going to show you some of the troubleshooting steps we go through. This episode might be a snooze fest to some, but this is the technical troubleshooting that a lot of people leave out when building something like this. Okay, so here is an update as to what's going on with the Honda Beat, aka the E-Beat, I guess you could call it. So we have almost all of the electronics from the Arcimoto in the Honda Beat right now, and this just looks like a spaghetti, absolute wiring mess. Now, there's a couple things that are going on with this I just want to explain to you. Now, we do not have to install all of these components in the Beat. If you look carefully, we have the heater from the Arcimoto, and we also have the power steering motor from the Arcimoto as well. Those things do not necessarily need to be plugged in. However, I'm not sure on the programming of the Arcimoto itself. Sometimes it may look for things, and if they're not there, it might throw an error message. For example, on Teslas, if it can't find the front motor, the car's not going to drive. Or there's also very specific components that the car looks for upon startup, and if they're not present, then it actually won't engage the drive rails. So right now, when I start this up, I'll show you what happens. Batteries connected, they're connected there. This is an absolute mess. I'll show you what happens with this. The screen, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. It does turn on, which is good. We actually jumped the foot brake because when it starts up, it actually asks you to push the brake down. And we have that jump right there. That's the brake mechanism. And I'm just going to push the startup button right here. And after I hold that, it gives me a high voltage light, which is kind of normal-ish. But if I go here and I toggle this back and forth, I'm not getting any change. When I go to forward reverse, it still remains in neutral. And it says regen off. Use foot brake. So I'm just going to turn this back off, use the breaker to shut it off. But it's giving me a very specific error message on the high voltage. I'm not really sure what that is. I have the tilt switch face in the vertical position just in case it thinks it's rolled over. I have all the wiring that's supposed to be connected from both contactor boxes. Remember, we made this earlier, made this one too. We just have to seal this off. But again, this is just for testing purposes. All the high voltage is hooked up, all the logic's hooked up, as well as the BMS. So I'm not really sure why it's not firing up. And because of that, I had to bring the second Arcimoto Roadster. Now, remember, I had a Roadster like this, and this same exact Roadster, oh well, the second copy of it. I have this Roadster here for a couple of reasons. One, there is no wiring diagram for the Arcimoto currently because they're going through some issues right now, to say the least. They've never released a public wiring diagram. If I had a wiring diagram for this, this would make life a lot easier. Also, if I knew what components had to be connected for this to work, that would make life easier as well. Unfortunately, I don't have that, so I have to use the third Arcimoto to diagnose and troubleshoot what's going on. So there's a couple different ways this could happen. What I can do is I can unplug everything and essentially start all over again. Or what I could do with this one is pull the front nose off, get to the electronics. I don't want to kill this one altogether. I just want to make sure that all the wiring is correct. As of right now, this does run. Linda and John rolled this to the shop. Thank you guys both very much. What I'm going to start doing in this one is I'm actually going to start reversing both ends and bringing them closer together. What I mean is I'm slowly going to start disconnecting things from this Arcimoto to see when it stops running. And I'm slowly going to start to plug in more and more things to see when this starts running. And that'll give me a better idea for what high voltage components are necessarily, are needed to make this thing work. Or it could be a sensor wire. I am not 100% sure, but there's so many components that make this thing up, it's not even funny. Okay, so I can see the flashing green light on the secondary controller. The first one is static. Headlights are on. And there are no error messages besides this one. Once you kick it on, it's free to go. It goes into drive and neutral. So I now know that the front end makes very little difference in terms of lighting. Now I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper. So what you can't see in the time lapse, but this gives me a pretty clear look of what we might be missing on the other one. But what I've been doing was I've been going ahead and labeling each one of these connectors that I'm disconnecting. So that's just the front right turn signal, that's the front right park, and I'm just gonna label the rest of these lights. And as I unplug these, I'm actually gonna turn the Arcimoto back on to make sure that it still works. I'm not really sure if there's some strange programming. There's no resistance found in some of the light circuits and it's not gonna drive. I highly, highly doubt it. I also wanna know if it actually throws any codes for lights in general. I want to see how intelligent this system is, but I guess we're going to find out pretty soon. After I pull the rest of the front nose off, that's where I'm going to fire it up again, see what I could unplug and get away with. Now, unfortunately, I still can't get this thing to work. What I went ahead and did was I removed all of the wiring that I had in here and I moved it over to the front. And I just want to inspect all the wiring, make sure there's no nicks and cuts, and I want to do some cross-referencing and making sure things are plugged in the right place. What I started doing was I started undoing, the coolant pumps, the power steering pump, and things like that, just to make sure it wasn't going to trigger a high voltage issue. But then again, I don't think anything's going to be triggered from the low voltage to the high voltage system. So for example, I'm not going to get a high voltage error just by unplugging some 12 volt accessories. What I want to do now is I want to simulate a high voltage issue on this Arcimoto to see what the symptoms are. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna undo the high voltage cables over here. There's two high voltage cables that plug into the main battery. Okay, went ahead and undid those. And I'm really curious to see what error message it gives. Again, this is just basic troubleshooting because I have no manuals. So on the brake. Okay. All right. So I got a red 12 volt. And that is not responding to any commands, which is good. Okay, so I'm getting the red 12-volt light, meaning I think all the accessories are running strictly off the 12-volt battery, and the DC to DC converter isn't working. So let's see, parking brake, and there's no response when I do any of this. Very interesting. Those are the same exact symptoms I got before. And if I look at the front of the controllers, there's no lights on the controller. So I'm 98% sure there's a high voltage issue. I'm gonna go ahead and double check all the connections on the battery over here just to see what I missed. But I think we're getting close. Once I get a full, 100 volts or whatever voltage is from the pack, I'm pretty sure I'll then be able to go in and do some things. So I'm gonna plug this back in, and I'm curious as to when the contactors click. Okay, I think I found our problem here. That was never connected. So no matter what we did, it was never getting the full capacity of the battery. However, strangely enough, when I measure the voltage on those two terminals right there, the one below and the one on top, one below is positive, one on top is negative, I'm getting 66 volts, which kind of doesn't make any sense. These are two independent batteries. How is it giving me a total of 66 volts when they're not even connected? Here's a bigger problem. 29 volts, right? It's grounded. There's a major isolation issue. So as of right now, there's 30 volts going through the car at any given point in time. But on the other side, there's 60 volts going through the car at any given point in time. So that's the reason why we have a high voltage issue. We've run into a little problem on our hands here. And if we look, that's showing 49 volts.
It's not supposed to have anything.
It's not supposed to have anything. Look at that. It's showing 49 volts to the chassis.
Oh, yep. No, it's got it all throughout the car.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
So there's 50 volts going through the car. So there is a problem somewhere.
How? The battery's not connected.
Battery's not connected. Look, that's not connected up there. That top one is just open, but there's 50 volts going through it. So the battery has to come out. We're very lucky in the sense that it isn't 400 volts and it's only 50, but 50 is still enough to ruin your day. So we have to be extra careful and cautious about pulling this out. Because remember, last night I touched the voltmeter, the multimeter to those two sides, right? And I got voltage, and I was like, cool, that's awesome. Then I went on that side and realized it wasn't connected, and I was like, oh.
That's not good.
So needless to say, that is no good.
51
volts, yeah. So it's getting the power from both batteries right now. It doesn't make any sense.
How's it getting?
I have no idea. So what we have to do is we have to put the car back down.
Dude, they're not even touching each other.
Brother, I don't know.
Oh,
so now we have to do some testing on the case itself. Maybe the case is not isolated, which still wouldn't make any sense.
Then how would it not arc out in the Arcimoto? Inside
to be fair, in the Arcimoto, there were rubber pads floating inside of it.
That's your solution?
Oh, wait a second. Okay.
Hang on, let me move my arm around it. Ready?
Yep.
This thing's heavier than it looks.
Heavy mother.
Whatever you say.
So we're at the moment of truth here. Now's the time we have to figure out, is this thing going to actually work? This is the first time an Arcimoto setup has been running outside of an Arcimoto. I'm pretty sure. No one's ever done this before. But what we have here, we have the Arcimoto 2 batteries. We were measuring the voltage. We were getting 50 volts throughout the entire car. So there was a really strange grounding slash high voltage isolation issue going on. We weren't really sure what that was, so we decided to troubleshoot it by taking both batteries out of the car. We're hoping this works now. No room for isolation issues. We have a blanket in between both batteries, and it's both on top of a piece of plastic on both sides, so no metal is touching whatsoever. Here, we have the positive going to the first contactor box, negative going to the other contactor box. And here we have the rear BMS and the front BMS. BMS stands for Battery Management System. Now, one area of concern that I was kind of freaking out for, if you look right here, before these cables were connected, we were actually measuring the voltage on both sides, and we got 90 volts. So nothing was being connected, no batteries were connected, and we were getting 90 volts. We're freaking out, we're saying to ourselves, why is this happening? Us not realizing that the BMS wires were hooked up, and the BMS essentially connects both batteries together to give you one battery percentage. So there's two batteries, and on this display, it's to give you one percentage. So what this BMS has to do, because they're two separate banks of batteries, it has to combine both so they act as one. So that's why we were getting 90 volts when we were connecting them, even though the batteries weren't physically connected. The physical connection were the both BMSs. So we have everything else hooked up. There's the logic, wiring harnesses, regenerative braking. Pretty much everything is here ready to rock. So is this going to work? I sure hope so. I don't really feel like dealing with this another night. We ran into a whole bunch of issues with those batteries grounding out against the chassis. The chassis was reading 30 volts, 60 volts, 90 volts in some cases. So we wanted to make sure we got both of these out. We were getting high voltage faults on the display. That wasn't working either. And we thought back to it. We were trying to figure out why. And on the Arcimotos, when I got my first Arcimoto wet, you would see the high voltage light turn on. And once that turns on, it means there's a ground fault somewhere. So some water is touching two wires together. We were getting that same issue where the batteries were grounding out in the car. So we know there was an isolation fault and it wasn't working at all. Now we have most of the things hooked up. I'm glad this Arcimoto is stupid in a sense where it doesn't need all the connectors to start working. It doesn't need the power steering. I don't think it needs the chargers plugged in at all, or the J1772, the onboard chargers to work. So I think this should technically work. One issue that we ran into, Joey, you know this. This is the tilt sensor. We were troubleshooting this, bashing our heads against the wall. This was not plugged in, or was it not level? I forget.
It was just popped out.
It was just popped out. So there's a million things that could go wrong. This seems like a lot easier. Like in theory, you think to yourself, take all the electronics and stuff it into one thing. It is not even close to that easy. This is pretty difficult. I would say in terms of difficulty, probably like an 8. It's up there. Either way, let's try to fire this thing up for the first time. I don't know where the key is. And the screen isn't working. Okay, let's see what we can do. Where's the actual key to this thing? Where is the key, Joey? Did we ever find the key?
No, we never found it.
Okay, so we don't know where the key is. That's how many wires there are here. We don't know where the key is for the startup sequence. You know what? Let's go keyless. Because I think we already jumped it.
Yeah.
Right? So I hit the breaker. We hear the contactor click, which is a good sign. I hope this display turns on. Ooh, that's good. Joey went ahead and he jumped the foot brake, because remember, in order to start the Arcimoto up, you have to have your foot on the brake so it doesn't just take off all of a sudden. Because there's a safety method built in that if the Arcimoto is in drive and you start it up, it could literally just take off and hit someone. So it wants to make sure your foot's on the brake first. After that, we have the squeeze startup button. Startup button is right here. All those lights are out. Another contactor click, which is good. Electronic parking brake is still active, but that's okay. We could actually just, I think we could push this.
We didn't connect it.
It's not connected, so we can't just push that. But right now it's in neutral.
Let's see if it spins.
Let's see if it spins. We're gonna go forward. Awesome, look. Parking brake enabled, don't worry about that. We have a status light on the controller, which is good. And all we're waiting for now is to hear some sound from both motors. Let's listen for it. Sounds good to me.
Oh, look at that. The speed works.
Oh.
Try the regen.
86, regen, right?
And the regen works.
And the regen works, right? So This thing's gonna sound pretty cool. That's how this thing's gonna slow down. This is gonna be quite a quick little car, I think. So I'm glad we actually were able to get this thing working, because we were getting kicked with this thing. So now here comes the hard part. We have to stuff what's effectively 10 pounds of, poop into a 5-pound bag. There's a lot of electronics here. Both batteries that weigh, I don't even know how many hundreds of pounds. All these electronics on top. We have to take the convertible roof off. There's a lot that has to fit back into this. But so far, I mean, we're doing all right so far. Now comes the installation of everything, and then secondly, we have to do the integration of everything. We have to have this screen up here, all that good stuff. We also have to figure out why it's showing speed, because this is supposed to be GPS-based speed. So why is it showing up here? I don't know if there's like a synchronization process, like once the vehicle starts moving, it does a comparison between what the motor speed is and the actual vehicle speed. But this does have a GPS-based speedometer. You can see right over here. This is the GPS-based speedometer. I remember, actually, you know what's funny? It's not even hooked up, is it?
No. But I did confirm it, though, on Waze, that it will do 86.
It will do 86. I think that's good for this car, because any faster, like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to prove? So, I mean, the whole goal was to make an inexpensive sports car, and I think it kind of worked, because granted, these things were because I'm a YouTuber. They were a lot cheaper for me, but for you, if you wanted to do this, because this is so easy, what you could do is you could get a Honda Beat. I think Honda Beats are like $5,000 now if you want like a regular one. Maybe if you find one that has a blown motor, you get it for like $2,000 or $3,000. You buy an Arcimoto for 10. That's actually not that bad. You could have a sports coupe for like $15,000 plus maybe like, I don't know, 200 hours in labor, and then that's all you need. So now we're gonna start the process of putting everything back into the Arcimoto, undoing all these cables and wires, and just hoping for the best.